Hey everyone, it's Karen with Yes Please PaperCrafts, and in today's video we're going to be using Cricut Design Space to create journaling that you can use in your scrapbook layouts. This tutorial is part of the Scrapbooking with Cricut Course 301, and it's called Titles and Words. And in this video I will be sharing Lesson 1, Journaling Blocks and Strips. So this lesson is broken up into 4 parts, and I did that because I'm going to put links in the description below where you can jump to the part you would like to watch if you don't want to watch the entire tutorial. So let's get started with part 1 of this lesson, which is adding journaling text to Cricut Design Space. Okay, so I've already created a project in Cricut Design Space, and now I just want to add some journaling. So I'm going to go over here to the left hand side of the screen where we have this toolbar, and I'm going to click on text. Now that's going to add this text box where I can type in my journaling. So I'm just going to type my journaling here, and I'm creating a scrapbook layout for a picture that I took at a crop that I attended last year, and this was a picture that we took in the photo booth. So I'm going to write here, having fun taking pics in the photo booth at the crop in Mandeville, Louisiana, with Judy, Tina, Mom, and me. And then I'm going to put the date, which was the 21st of September last year. Okay, so now that we have our journaling added to this text box, you can see down here that this is what the journaling would look like, and it's using the default font and the default size for Cricut. Now this is really large. It's font size 72, and it looks like it's larger than 12 inches, so that's way too big. So we're going to have to work on changing the font and the size. Okay, so I did want to share something with you guys, just in case you're not familiar with working with these text boxes, is if you're wanting to change the text, you need to go to the text box and double click, and that will bring up this little box where you can go and change the text that you have there. And if you want to make that go away, just go back over here to this part and click just once, and that will make it come out of edit mode. So to get into edit mode to edit your text, you double click, and to get out of the edit mode, you just single click, and that will go away. Now I want to go ahead and drag this up to the top of the canvas so that we can see what this looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag it with my mouse up here, and you can see it's very large. So let's go ahead and work on getting this font changed, and that's going to take us to part 2, writing fonts, and how to change the font in Cricut Design Space. So when you're working in Cricut Design Space with text boxes and you have your text box selected, you will see this text editing panel up here at the top of your screen, and you can change things like the font, the style, the size, and various other attributes of the font. What we're going to be doing today though is just changing the font and the size, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this down arrow, and that will show me all of the fonts available in Cricut. Now this includes things that you have purchased, as well as Cricut Access and anything you have installed on your computer. So if you want to see just the fonts you have installed on your computer, you can click on System. And if you want to see the fonts included with Cricut, you can click on Cricut. And then over here there's some more filtering that you can do. You can click on Filter, and you can filter by My Fonts, which is fonts that you have purchased, like fonts that come with your cartridges. You can also click on multi-layer, single layer, or writing, and those are the different types of fonts in Cricut. So the single layer fonts and the multi-layer fonts are cutting fonts, and when you use those, it will cut out words or letters depending on how you build the text within your text box. The third option here is the writing font, and that's what we're going to be using today because I want to use a pen to write out my journaling. And it's really cool that you can use a pen because it really does make it look more like something that you wrote yourself as opposed to something you printed with your printer, because you could do a print and cut, But I'm just going to go ahead and just use a writing font and use one of my pens. So I'm going to click on writing, and that's going to filter all the fonts in Cricut and just show me the ones that have the writing style available. Now if you look at the first font here, which is the Three Birds Life's a Party, you can see that not only does it have a writing font, but it also has the multi-layer cutting font. So some of the fonts have multiple things it can do. As opposed to this one down here, which is the Adelaide, it only has a writing font. Okay, so in order to find the font, you can actually use this scroll bar over here and just scroll down and just look at all of the different fonts available. Now, one of the things I wish Cricut would add is I wish that they would give you the ability to be able to highlight each one of the fonts and then see what your text down here is going to look like. There's a lot of other software out there that does that. For example, Microsoft Word, if you were in Microsoft Word, you could highlight text and then change the font just by picking it from the list, and just scrolling down the list, it will show you the different fonts and how your text will look. Now, although Cricut does show you this example, which is the Quick Brown Fox, it doesn't exactly show you what your text is going to look like. And one of the things that I think is interesting about working with fonts is you could have a font that looks really good with maybe the name Judy, but it looks terrible with the name Karen just because the K is a weird shape. So although you may like a font, if you look at it here and you're looking at this example, you might not like it with the text that you're trying to work with. And so I'm just going to go ahead, and one of the things you could do is you could just pick a font and you can look and see, well, what is this going to look like? Do I like it? And I don't know, that's kind of curly. It's got curly G's and little circle dots, and it's not really my style. So I'm going to go back up here and click on the list again. And you can just scroll down here until you find the one you like. And I think for this project, I've already done this project, and I'm going to be doing it again because when I did it the first time, I actually had some grammatical errors in how I wrote it because I started out writing something different and then I changed it, and then I didn't go back, I guess, and read it really well because, yeah, it had extra words in there. So it doesn't sound right when you read it because it's not written well. So I'm going to go down and use exactly the same font that I used before, and the font that I used was one that started with the letter K, I think. Or, you know what, I hope I remember which one it is. Oh yeah, here it is. It's this one right here. It's called the Kaiden font. It's a single layer cutting font or a writing font. I'm going to click on that, and that's going to show me this. Okay, so the other thing we need to do before we can make this project is we have to change the size because it's still really large. It's larger than 12 inches and it's not going to work really well right now. It's way too big for my project. So let's go ahead and change the size. I'm going to go up here to the font size, and I'm just going to change it to maybe, let's try 18 and see how that looks. I think I wanted it, that's a little bit too small. I think the other thing you can do is also you can take this little arrow here and you can pull it and make it, any size you want. And I think when I first created this project, I made it 4.5 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this 4.5 inches again so it'll be the same size, because if I can't get it unstuck from my project, I'm just going to be gluing this down on top of what's already there. So now that we have selected the font we want to use and we also resized this to fit our project, that takes us to part 3, creating a journaling block. So if we were to create this project as it is right now, the only thing the Cricut would do would be to draw out these words using the pen. And so you could just put a piece of cardstock on your mat and have the Cricut draw the words out, but the chances are it's not going to be even and it's going to be Cricut. So a better way to create a journaling block is to add a rectangle to your project that the Cricut can cut out after it draws out your text. So what we're going to do is go over here to Shapes, click on the square, and we're going to turn the square into a rectangle by clicking on this little lock button down here, and that's going to unlock our shape so that we can adjust both the height and the width. So I'm going to turn this into a rectangle. So I'm also going to go up here and change the color to white, and that's going to make it easier for us to work with this because our text is black, and it'll make the text stand out on this white rectangle. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is to take the text and put it on top of this rectangle. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab the text, and we're going to just move it down here. Now, the text is behind the rectangle, so it's going to be really hard for us to see it. So what we need to do is to move that and rearrange things so that the text is in the front. So I'm going to go and click on Arrange and move forward, or even you can do move forward or you can do send to front. And the difference there is if you have multiple layers, like you had 3 or 4 layers, move to front moves it to the very front, and move forward just moves it forward 1 layer. So when you only have 2 layers, it doesn't really matter which one of those you pick. Both of them act the same, whether you pick move forward or move to the front. Okay, so now that we can see our text on top of the rectangle, I do want to resize my rectangle a little bit more. So I'm going to click on the rectangle, I'm going to click on the lock to unlock it, and then I'm going to resize this a little bit and make it into the size that I want for my journaling block. Okay, so now if we were to click on make it, it's going to not only write it out, but it's also going to cut out this rectangle. Now the problem is that it's going to do this on 2 different mats. And this is where a lot of times people run into problems because they don't realize that because you put things on the Cricut canvas in a certain way and it looks a certain way on your project, you always have to check when you make it to see how it's actually going to be making your project. And in this case, Cricut thinks that it should write out these words, and then you're put in another sheet of paper and it's going to cut this rectangle out. And that's not what we want. So I'm going to click on cancel here. So in order to get Cricut to write out our text and then cut a rectangle around it at the same time, we need to attach these 2 things together. So what we're going to do is go up here, and I'm going to use my mouse. I'm going to hold down the mouse button and then drag this and let go, and it's going to select both the text and the square. And you can see up here that both of my layers are selected. Now I can click on attach, and now that attaches it together. And if we click on make it now, you can see that Cricut will write out our text and then cut the rectangle around the text, and it will create a journaling block that you can use on your layout. So if I wanted to create a journaling block to put in my layout, I'd be done. But I wanted to create little journaling strips because I kind of like that look, and I just wanted it to be in little pieces that I could add to my layout. And so that's going to take us to part 4, creating journaling strips. So there's probably a lot of different ways to create journaling text, but I'm going to share with you how I create mine. And one of the things I like to do is to keep all the text in one text box, because you could actually create journaling strips by creating a separate text box for each line of text. But if you want to change the font or the size of the font or something else, then you have to go into each one of the text boxes and make the change to that font. And so I would rather just keep it all in one text box. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and edit the text box and add space in between each line of text so that we can create our journaling strips. So to do that, we're going to double click, and that should take us into editing mode. And you'll notice nothing happened. And that is because I forgot to detach the text box from that rectangle. And so I left this in here because I think that y'all are going to probably forget and do this. And so I wanted to show you what would happen if you didn't detach your text box from the rectangle. So what we need to do is go down here and click on detach, and then we can move this rectangle, and we'll be able to edit the text. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on the text, and that should bring up the text editing box. And in order to make this bigger so that we can kind of see what we're doing, I'm going to drag the corner of this box down and make this bigger. And that way it's just a little bit easier to see what you're doing. So we're going to go up here to the second line, and I'm going to just hit the return key, and that's going to add a space between the first and the second row. I'm going to do the same thing with the third line and then with the fourth line. And so we'll have space in between each row of text, and we can create our journaling strips. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of editing mode. And the next thing we're going to need to do is to get this rectangle and resize it into the shape we need for our journaling strip. So I'm just going to make it into a much narrower rectangle and then put it on top of this line of text. Now I do want to leave some white space because in my project I actually tucked one edge under the photo and I created a banner on the other end. So if you want to create banners, you want to make sure you leave a little bit of extra space after the words or before the words so that you have space to work with when you're putting it on your project. So one thing that we also have to keep in mind is that I wanted my journaling strips to be 4.5 inches long. And you can see here by the size of this rectangle that the rectangle is 6 inches. And that's going to be too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this text, and I want to make the text smaller. So I'm going to go up to the font size and I'm going to change it to 18. And that's going to make the font smaller so that I can make the journaling strip into a 4.5 inch strip. And you can resize it using the handle here, but sometimes if you know a specific size that you want to make something, you can just go up here to where it has the width and the height, and I can just go and type in 4.5, and that way I'll know I have the right size. Now I'm just going to adjust this a little bit to make sure it's centered on top of that text. And I want a little bit more space at the end on the right hand side. And so I think that looks good. Now once you have the rectangle the size that you wanted, you're going to want to make a rectangle for each row of text that you have. So we're going to go up here to this menu bar up here, and I'm going to click on duplicate, and I'm going to duplicate this 3 times. And now we have 4 rectangles, and you can see that our 3 new rectangles are in the front, and we need to push those to the back so that we can see our text. So I'm going to click on each one of these rectangles and then click on arrange and then send to back. And we're just going to send each of these rectangles to the back so that we can see our text and we can get all of this lined up. So now I'm going to move each one of these rectangles so that it's over each one of these lines of text. Okay, I think that looks really, really good. So there's one more thing that you can do if you want to make sure that all of your text is even, and that is to use the align tool to line these up. So to do that, you need to select all of the rectangles. So I'm going to click on the first rectangle. I'm going to hold down my control key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to select each one of these rectangles. And that's going to select all 4 rectangles at one time. Then you can go up to the Align menu and click on Align Left, and that will align all of those text boxes to the left, or all of the rectangles to the left. Now if we were to click on Make It for this project, we're going to have problems because it's going to try to write out all of the text on one mat, and then it will try to cut all 4 rectangles on the second mat. And so we don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Cancel. And we're going to need to attach the rectangles and the text box together. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click and drag my mouse to select all 4 rectangles and the text box. And then we can go down to this toolbar and click on Attach. Now when we click on Make It, you can see that the Cricut will write out all of our text and then cut out each individual journaling strip. So now that we have created these journaling strips, let's take a look at how they would look on a scrapbook layout. So I created this layout as a part of the design team that I'm on for scraparts-blogspot.com, and this is for the March Sketch Challenge. And I do have a scrapbook process video for this layout, so if you're interested in seeing that, I will put a link in the description below to that video. So I decided to take each one of these journaling strips and turn it into a banner, and I also tucked it under the picture, and I really love the way that this turned out. Now, if you're wondering, I still have not fixed the grammatical error in my journaling. This is the video footage from my scrapbook process video. I do plan on fixing my layout, I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. So that's all I have for this Cricut tutorial, and I hope I've inspired you to use your Cricut more for scrapbooking and for creating journaling. And if you like this video, please give it a like, and if you would like to see more Cricut tutorial videos, please subscribe. I would love to have you join my channel. And that's all I have, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.